I've got a double whammy test for ChatGPT today. It's the 6th of January 2024, and in the UK we have a new national insurance tax that comes into effect. So the double whammy test is to ask it, what does this new tax change mean for me? Will I be paying more or less tax, and by how much? And the reason it's a double whammy test is because, well, it obviously has to do the calculation, right? It's an arithmetic test. Can it think through a quantitative problem and get to a useful conclusion and communicate it in a very natural way to a human? The second part of the test is that this version of ChatGPT that we currently have was trained on data to May 2023. That's the information that it has in its large language model training. But the change in the tax was only announced in November 2023, and of course now come into effect in 2024. But that means that when ChatGPT 4 Turbo, the current model, was trained, it didn't know or couldn't have known about the new tax rate. So it has to not just understand the question, but it also needs to understand that it needs to go to the internet and get new information and apply it to the calculation of the question that I'm going to ask it. So this is the question that I'm asking it. Well, I already asked it. First of all, I told it that you are a tax expert in the UK. I am a normal employee of a company making a salary of £35,000 per year. That's the median salary in the UK. Can you please explain the changes to national insurance which come into effect from today, 6 January 2024, and how this will change how much tax I pay? And then it gave this quite long explanation of the change. It got it correct, that it's a reduction from 12% to 10%, and the impact on people in terms of it reducing the tax burden and increasing your disposable income, your take-home pay, and it gave some advice about when we can expect that to come into effect, when we would see it in our bottom line, in our bank account, and how companies need to update their systems in order to make sure that this new lower tax is calculated on your payroll. But if it doesn't happen, if your company is a bit slower to put it into effect, that won't disadvantage you. You'll get it in later months anyway, including the back pay. So it gave a lot of useful information and context around it, but it didn't actually do the calculation. So I had to prompt it again. I said, are you able to please calculate the amount of national insurance tax I pay, firstly under the previous national insurance tax rate, and secondly under the new rate? And so I forced it to give me a quantified answer. It said under the previous national insurance rate of 12%, your annual national it's a bit of a tongue twister. Your annual national insurance contribution would have been approximately £3,051.84. With the new rate of 10%, your annual contribution would be about £2,543.20. Therefore, with the new national insurance rate, you would be paying approximately £508.64 less in national insurance contributions annually. So it's understood the question, it's done a calculation, and it's got to an answer, and it's explained it in a very natural way to me. It's completely understandable. The small problem is that it's wrong, and so let's find out why it's wrong. And to do that, well, first of all, to prove that it's wrong, let's have a look at the BBC tax calculator. And if you go, you can use any tax calculator that you want. I use the BBC one because it's easy. Plug in here 35,000 and hit calculate, and it'll tell you that the old rate would have meant that you would have paid £2,691.60, and the new rate £2,243 exactly per year. So it's off, ChatGPT is off by about just over £300 on each of those. So it's got something wrong in its calculation. So let's ask it for its workings to find out where it's got it wrong. So let's ask, can you show me the calculations you used to get these results? Certainly. How polite. Here are the calculations I used to determine your national insurance contributions under both the old and new rates. So the salary is correct. The threshold that it used for these purposes of the calculation, I used £9,568. This is the threshold for the 2020-2021 tax year. The actual threshold may be different for 2024, but I used this for an estimation. So that's why it's wrong, is because it's used old data. I don't know why it's used old data, because I know for a fact that the threshold is different now. This is the threshold, that you don't pay national insurance tax for all income that you make up until this threshold, and then you only start paying tax beyond that threshold. And because I know the threshold is higher, it means that it's over-calculated how much tax you pay because it's used an incorrectly low tax-free threshold. Cool. Okay, so its calculations are correct. Like the methodology is right. It's right the whole way through. The only mistake it's made actually is using an outdated assumption for the threshold. Okay, so let me try get it to find its mistake and give me the correct answer. This mostly looks correct, but can you check the internet to see if there is any new information about the national insurance threshold for 2022-23? If it is different to the number you used in the above calculations, can you please redo the calculations? It says the national insurance threshold for 2022-23 tax year was set at 12,570 per year. So it's got the correct number. I know that that's the correct threshold, both for 2022-23 and it's been maintained in 23-24. So that's correct for it to use now. And it's redoing its calculation based on that, and it gets to, under the old rate, 12%, the total in our contribution was £2,691.60. So that's the correct amount that we found on the BBC tax calculator or any other calculator will give you the same number. And under the new rate, it gives £2,243. So that's correct. And then it also goes on to say we're going to save approximately £448.60 under the new rate. I don't know why it says approximately, because that's exactly correct. So it's got to the right answer now. I'm really impressed. I mean, it's not quite at the level that you can use ChatGPT to do your taxes or calculate these changes, because it didn't get to the correct answer out the box. You had to know how the calculation should have been done in order to spot where it made the mistake and force it to correct itself. And you can do this by using an online tax calculator. All that means is that it's still faster for you to just use an online tax calculator rather than using ChatGPT. But credit where credit's due, its methodology and everything was 100%, its methodology was 100% correct. It just made one mistake in that it used an outdated assumption. It used the tax threshold from 2020-21 tax year. I don't know why it used that. There was new information out there. It could find it because when I prompted it to look, it found it. And ultimately, it then did do the correct calculation and got to the right answer. So I don't know why it used old data, but the reality is it did. And if you didn't know how to check for it, you would have got the wrong number and not known it unless you did something else like going to an online tax calculator, which probably is the right thing to do. So I don't recommend that you use ChatGPT for things like this just yet, even though I'm very impressed at how much it got correct.